On my wedding day, I stood in the bridal suite thick with the scent of white flowers and hairspray, wearing the dress my mother had cried the moment she saw, while my phone kept vibrating in my hand because everyone was asking the same question. Where was the groom? Outside the door, the guests had almost all arrived. I could hear shoes crossing the wooden hallway floor, the laughter of a few relatives from my side of the family, the catering staff dragging chairs out on the lawn, the string quartet rehearsing the opening passage they had already played all morning. Everything was moving in the perfect rhythm of a beautiful wedding, except for one single detail no one wanted to name too soon. Daniel was not there. Not in the groom's suite, not out among the vineyard rows, not answering his phone, not answering text. Not a single person knew where he was. At first, everyone kept their voices soft, as if speaking quietly might somehow make the truth smaller too. My wedding planner, Nina, was a woman in her late 30s, hair tied low, wearing white sneakers under a black dress. The kind of person so professional that even if the whole world were on fire, she could still talk about the timeline in a calm voice. She stepped into my room at 2:17 p.m., iPad in hand, lips pressed together just a little differently than usual. "Sarah, he's not here yet, but Mark said maybe he just stepped out for some air. You know how men are, a lot of them panic before the ceremony." I looked at her through the mirror while the makeup artist dabbed powder under my eyes. "How long is a little?" I asked. "Maybe 20 minutes, 30. Have you tried calling him again?" I held up my phone. 13 missed calls, 8 texts, not one response. I still remember forcing a smile then, a thin smile hard as glass. "Maybe he got cold feet," I joked, but my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. No one in the room laughed, even my mother, who always tried to save any atmosphere with some clumsy little joke, only turned away and adjusted my veil on my shoulder, as if suddenly she needed something to do with her hands, so she would not say the wrong thing out loud. By 3:02, the guests were almost all seated outside beneath the white rows of chairs by the vineyard. The September sunlight poured through the vines in that pale gold way that feels beautiful to the point of cruelty. I stood in the dressing room, already in my gown, my shoes on, bouquet in hand, while my fingers had gone so cold I could barely feel them. Daniel's phone was still off. Mark, who was supposed to be his best man, stood in the hallway outside with a face gone completely white, eyes refusing to meet mine directly. My father had died 3 years earlier, so the one who was supposed to walk me down the aisle that day was my Uncle David, my father's younger brother. He was wearing a charcoal suit, standing at the door of the room like a post, his hand clenching and unclenching in helplessness. I remember that moment so clearly, the moment when I still believed all of this was just some short-lived panic before the wedding, that somewhere out there he was sitting in his car, breathing too hard, trying to steady himself, and that he would come back and apologize for throwing everyone into chaos. I still believed I could forgive cold feet. I could forgive panic. I could forgive a man being afraid of a moment that large. I believed that, right up until the day I saw him again, weeks later, walking beside someone he was never supposed to be beside, inside a life I was never supposed to know existed. My name is Sarah Whitmore. I was 35 on the day I was supposed to become the wife of Daniel Mercer, or at least the man I believed was Daniel Mercer for almost 3 years. I lived in the suburbs of Greenwich, Connecticut, in a small white rental house with a low wooden fence and a few lavender bushes out front that I planted the spring Daniel moved in with me. I worked as a speech therapist for a public elementary school, not a glamorous job, but a steady one, enough to live decently, enough to have health insurance, enough to have a routine, enough to feel that every day I was helping children say words they had not been able to say before. My life before Daniel was not the kind of thing people turn into a novel. A good job, a small apartment, then a rented house, an aging mother living in New Haven, few past relationships that were not dramatic enough to haunt me and not deep enough to destroy my faith in love. Just enough to teach me that adulthood was no longer about finding someone who made your heart race, but someone who made your life quiet. I met Daniel one evening in early October in an independent bookstore in Stamford, where I stopped in after work only because it was raining and I did not feel like driving straight home yet. I still remember the smell of new paper mixed with roasted coffee, the soft jazz playing through the speakers, the way I was standing in the contemporary fiction section when a man behind me picked up the book I had dropped. "You dropped this," he said. His voice was low, soft, not trying to sound charming. When I turned around, the first thing I thought was not that he was handsome, but that he looked very calm. Some people walk into a space and bring their own noise with them. Daniel was the opposite. It was as if he absorbed some of the chaos out of a room. Tall, not overly broad, but lean and put together, wearing a dark blue coat, Dark brown hair cut short, gray eyes I would later spend far too long trying to forget. He asked what I was planning to buy, then said the book I had chosen dragged a little in the middle, but was worth it in the end. I asked how he knew. He smiled. Because I finished it in one sitting during a power outage. I laughed. It was the first time in my life I had ever seen a man talk about losing electricity and make it sound like the confession of something intimate. We started with coffee, then dinner, then those unexpectedly long messages past midnight. Daniel was not the kind of man who was loud, flashy, or made everything into a performance. He did not send flowers constantly. He did not text sugary things in the middle of the workday. He did not have that look-at-me energy of men who need to be admired. The most attractive thing about him, at least to me then, was his steadiness. He remembered the small things, remembered I was allergic to kiwi, remembered that every Wednesday I got home late because one of my students needed an extra speech session, remembered I hated driving over the bridge in heavy rain. Once I showed up at his place after a terrible day at work, tired enough to cry just because the school printer had broken. A parent had yelled at me, and I had never even gotten to eat lunch. Daniel did not ask many questions. He just set a bowl of hot chicken soup in front of me, exactly the kind I had once told him my mother used to make when I got sick as a child, then said, "You don't have to be interesting tonight. Just tired is okay." That line made me love him more than any candlelit dinner anyone had ever bought me. If I have to be brutally honest, the thing that made me love Daniel most was the feeling that he did not make my life harder. After a few relationships that kept me guessing what a text really meant, or whether some look meant they were already tired of me, a steady man felt like a warm room in winter. Daniel did not make me anxious. He showed up when he said he would, called back when he said he would, picked my mother up from the hospital once after a blood pressure scare without even waiting for me to ask. When I had the flu in the winter of our second year together, he drove to CVS at 11 p.m. to get exactly the cough medicine I could take, then slept on the couch because he was afraid of catching it. He never did things like that with the air of sacrifice that needs to be noticed. He did them as if that was simply what a man did when he loved someone. I remember once sitting in my kitchen watching him peel an apple, the yellow light falling over the gray sweater on his arm and the bridge of his nose, and thinking, Finally, I picked the right person. Daniel was so quiet about his past that it almost felt deliberate. At first, I thought that only made him seem deeper, more mysterious, more grown-up. He said he had grown up in a lot of different places because his family moved often. He barely spoke about his father. About his mother, he only said once that they were not close anymore. He did not have many close friends, at least not any who visibly existed inside our daily life. Few coworkers, one man named Mark, he said he had done a management program within Chicago, and that was about it. Every time I asked more about his childhood, Daniel would smile in that very slight way of his and say, "Nothing there worth telling." I used to think that was evidence of a wound, a dark place I should be respectful enough not to pry into. I loved him enough not to push, and I was proud enough of my own understanding to turn that avoidance into something noble, as if I were the kind of woman mature enough not to dig at the painful places in the man she loved. Looking back now, I understand a painful truth. A lot of the time, what we call depth is just empty space we filled with our own imagination. Even so, there were strange things. Not many, not enough to accuse him of anything. But now, when I line them up, they flash like bits of broken glass in sunlight. Daniel used to disappear for a few hours at a time, without a real explanation. Not often, just enough that I could forgive my own suspicion. Sometimes on a Saturday night, he would say he had to drive to New Jersey to take care of some paperwork and come back late. Sometimes we would be at dinner with one of my friends, and he would get a call, look at the screen for a second, then say he had to take it outside because it was too loud in here. 20 minutes later, he would come back calm as ever, and I would feel embarrassed to ask questions because I did not want to be the controlling woman in the room. Daniel also hated pictures online. Not mildly, really hated them. He did not like me tagging him on Instagram. Did not like anyone posting a picture with him in it without asking. Once I joked, "Are you in witness protection or something?" He laughed, bent down, kissed my forehead, and said, "I just like my life quiet." One time my friend Jen posted a group photo from dinner that included both of us, and Daniel texted me at midnight asking if maybe I could get her to take it down because I'm not comfortable being too public. I really did ask her. I even told Jen, "He's just private, that's all." Old school kind of guy, Jen shrugged. If you're okay with it, I was okay with it. Or maybe I had decided I had to be. Daniel proposed to me in Cape Cod over Memorial Day weekend in our 2.5 years together. No hidden photographer, no lights, just the beach in late afternoon, the wind so strong my hair kept sticking to my lipstick, and him kneeling in the sand with that usual calm of his cracked for the first time. His hand shook. He almost dropped the ring box. I still remember laughing through tears, because he was trying to speak and fight the wind at the same time. "Sarah, I know I'm not the easiest man to read," he said, "but with you, I've never wanted to run." Looking back now, that line feels like a warning note left inside a bouquet and overlooked. But then, all I heard was the most beautiful possible meaning. I cried, nodded, wrapped my arms around him, called my mother that same night, called my sister Lily in Boston. Everyone was happy in that way families get happy, when they think a woman has finally stepped into the right orbit of her life. Planning the wedding took almost a year. And it was also the stretch of time that made me love the version of Daniel I thought I knew more than ever. We chose a small vineyard in the Hudson Valley because both of us wanted something beautiful but not gaudy, with late afternoon light, string lights, good enough wine, and enough warmth in the air that people would feel like they were already inside a memory before the day had even happened. Daniel let me decide almost everything. Linen colors, flowers, menu, music. He only gave input on practical things like the timeline or parking for the guests. My mother loved him almost from the beginning. She said Daniel had that quiet decency older men used to have, the kind that does not need to say much to make a woman feel looked after. Every time she said that, I would feel this small, private pride, as if I had not chosen wrong. There was only one thing that made people raise an eyebrow. Daniel's side was nearly empty. No family, no relatives, no old friends from school. Just Mark's best man, 2 coworkers, and 1 former neighbor from Chicago Daniel said he respected a lot. I once asked, "Are you sure you don't want to invite anyone else?" Daniel shrugged. "You know how it is. My family is complicated, but shouldn't there be at least someone from your side?" He gave me that small smile. "You're my family." At the time, that line almost made me cry. Later, it sounded like a sentence written specifically to make women stop asking questions. My wedding day began at 6 in the morning with coffee, hair dryers, and bridesmaids talking too loudly, because none of us had had enough sleep to notice how much the room echoed. The vineyard that day was beautiful in a way that almost felt cruel. Golden sunlight, clear sky, just enough wind to make the veil move prettily, but not enough to wreck anyone's hair. I sat at the mirror while the makeup artist lined my eyes, and my mother stood behind me, lightly smoothing the lace at the back of my dress. "If your father could see you today, he'd cry louder than I did," she said. I smiled, my eyes already stinging. My Uncle David arrived close to noon in his charcoal suit, stared at me for a long second, and only said, "You look beautiful." Those first hours of that day were so perfect that if someone replayed them back now, they would see everything a wedding is supposed to have. Nerves, beautiful light, loving family, small pockets of laughter. Why? Everyone waits for something enormous to begin. At 1:40, Nina came in and said the groom was not at the venue yet, but that was fine, because Daniel had said he might arrive a little later so he would not have to sit around waiting too long. That sounded like him. Daniel hated idle time. At 2:05, Mark called Nina asking whether Daniel had gotten there yet. He had not. At 2:17, Nina stepped into my room with that too-controlled calm of someone who had started to worry, but did not want the worry to spread to the bride. "Mark says he left the hotel. Maybe he just stepped out to breathe a little." "Why would he need to breathe?" I asked. Nina forced a smile. "Groom nerves." I looked at my phone. Called Daniel. Voicemail. Texted. Not seen. Called again. Off. I frowned. Maybe he left his phone somewhere. My mother said that, and I nodded, because when people are afraid, they grab for whatever explanation is smallest and least dangerous. But by 2:40, even the kindest people in the room had run out of harmless explanations. Mark came into the room himself. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who used more aftershave than necessary. His face that day was dead white. "Sarah, I'm really sorry. I don't know where he is." I looked at Mark and waited for the rest of the sentence, for some reasonable second half. But that would save me from the whole opening under my feet. There was nothing. "You're his best man," I said, and my voice sounded foreign. "You have to know something." Mark clenched his jaw. "He was weird this morning. Quiet, but I thought it was normal. He stepped out after breakfast, said he needed air. I thought he'd be back in 20. And he never came back." I don't know how to describe what I felt in that moment with any word except this: suspended. Like my whole body had lost gravity. Not pain yet. Pain needs layers of comprehension. Suspension comes first. 3 o'clock was ceremony time. The guests were fully seated outside among the vines. The string quartet kept playing, then stopping, then starting again. Nina bought time by having the bartenders pour another round of Prosecco. My mother went into the bathroom and cried. then came back with her makeup repaired as carefully as possible. Uncle David kept pacing the hallway like a man, trying to find something useful to do when nothing useful exists. I sat in the bridal suite, my wedding dress spread around my legs like a cruel joke. Daniel's phone was still off. I called the hospitals. No one by that name anywhere. Mark called the coworkers. No one knew anything. Nina called the hotel desk. They confirmed Daniel had left around noon, alone. There were no accident reports on the road to the venue. No stalled car on the highway. No unidentified man in an ER. One by one, all the kind explanations quietly shut themselves like doors in a long hallway. At 3:28, Nina asked me in a voice barely above a whisper, "Sarah, do you want to cancel or wait a little longer?" I looked at myself in the mirror. Eyeliner perfect, lip color still clean, veil exactly in place, the white lace on my collarbone pristine. I looked like a flawless bride, inside a completely wrong story. 10 more minutes, I said, not because I really believed he would show up, but because some truths are so large that people need to grant themselves little extensions before they drown in them. Those 10 minutes lasted longer than any time I can remember in my life. I could hear guests whispering outside, chairs shifting, wind in the vines, my own heartbeat inside my ears. I stood up 3 times and sat down again. My mother held my hand and said all the things nobody truly believes in those moments. Maybe the car broke down. Maybe his phone died. Maybe someone stopped him. I nodded like a broken machine. Then at 3:39, I said, "It's not an accident." My mother looked at me. "How do you know?" And I answered, and it was the first time that day my voice sounded like someone who had aged 10 years in a few hours. Because if it were an accident, he would have left behind a world that still made sense. This isn't that. The wedding was canceled without ever really beginning. No processional music, no vows, no applause. Just Nina holding a microphone, voice shaking but still polite, telling everyone that due to a personal emergency, the ceremony would not go forward as planned. I stayed inside the room and heard the announcement through the outdoor speakers and felt like she was talking about somebody else's life. I did not go out to greet guests. I did not thank anyone. I did not hug anyone. I just sat there in a wedding dress that had cost nearly $3,000 and watched the peonies in my bouquet slowly start to loosen their petals. There are moments in life that split you away from yourself entirely. That afternoon was one of them. I saw bridesmaids crossing back and forth. I saw Lily arguing sharply with someone in the hallway. I saw my mother apologizing to each person, though none of this was her fault. I saw Uncle David standing in the doorway like a shadow. But everything looked like it was happening through thick glass. I was not fully inside my body anymore. The police came after the light had already started to shift. No sirens, no drama. Just 2 officers in uniform, polite to the point of making it all hurt more. They asked when Daniel had last been seen, what car he drove, whether he had ever been depressed, whether he was on medication, whether he had ever disappeared before. I answered every question like I was being tested on my own life. One of them, a female officer with blonde hair tied low, finally said softly, "At this point, ma'am, there's no sign of an accident, no hospital report, no calls. This may not be a typical missing person situation." I looked at her through my haze and asked, "So what are you saying?" She hesitated. "I'm saying there is a possibility he left voluntarily." That sentence made the whole room contract. My mother let out a broken sob. Lily swore out loud, and I felt nothing except a widening cold space deep in my stomach. That night I went home in my wedding dress, sitting in the back seat of my sister's car like a child being taken away from the scene of a wreck. As we drove over the bridge, I saw my reflection faintly in the window. Hair perfectly done, veil still intact, eyeliner still beautiful, and my eyes empty as if someone had hollowed me out and still expected me to breathe. When we got home, Lily took me upstairs and unzipped the dress as if she were peeling the skin off someone else. My mother made chamomile tea and set it on the table, but I never touched it. My phone would not stop vibrating. Guests, friends, coworkers, relatives, vendors, all wanting the answer to the same question I did not have. Daniel vanished from his own wedding without leaving a single line behind. No note, no apology, no explanation. Nothing. That was the part that humiliated me more deeply than the loss itself. Not just abandoned, but abandoned in total silence, as if I did not even deserve one final lie. The first 3 days after the wedding passed like a fever. I never slept more than 2 hours in a row. I sat in the kitchen staring at my phone until my eyes hurt. I called his number over and over, though I knew it was useless. Mark came by once, wearing the guilty face of a survivor who does not understand why he is the one left standing after the explosion. "Sarah, I swear to God I didn't know," he said. I believed Mark. There was real horror in his eyes, the kind you cannot fake. But believing him did not help me. Daniel's company confirmed he had taken 3 days off for the wedding and honeymoon. No one had heard from him since. His work email went dark. His LinkedIn was deleted by the next morning. Our wedding website received a few strange messages and then was hacked. Every engagement photo and bit of information wiped clean. The police said there was still no evidence of foul play, so as far as procedure went, this was still only adult voluntary disappearance. That phrase made me want to throw up. Voluntary disappearance, as if what had happened were just an administrative choice. By the 4th day, the shock began to give way to something else. Not exactly hope, not exactly reason. A need to know. I could not bear the fact that my life had been cut open and left unfinished at the ugliest point. Lily was the first person to say it plainly. If the police haven't found anything, we find it ourselves. I sat at the dining table, hair pulled into a loose knot, wearing my old Yale hoodie from college, and looked at my sister as if she had just proposed we go dig for gold in the backyard. Find what? I asked. Everything, Lily said. Email, computer, documents, storage, car, coworkers, past. He cannot just evaporate off the earth. I stared into my cold coffee. What if he just left? Lily slapped her hand against the table hard enough to make the spoon jump against the mug. Then at least you need to know who it was that left. We started with Daniel's laptop. It sat in the little office beside the kitchen, the place where he always spent evenings, finishing up a few last emails. I knew the password, or at least I thought I did. My birthday. Wrong. His mother's birthday. The one he had mentioned only once. Wrong. The date he proposed. Wrong. Lily looked at me. See, finally, after 5 failed guesses, I tried the name of the childhood dog Daniel had mentioned once after half a bottle of bourbon on a winter night. It opened. I stared at the screen and felt the sting of something stupidly intimate. The man who had vanished from my wedding still used the most private memory he had ever shared with me as the key I could use to walk into his traces. Even intimacy had been turned into a tool. At first, his email looked normal. Travel confirmations, work files, vendor notes for the wedding, bills, promotions, but it took Lily less than an hour to find the first thing that didn't fit. A secondary email linked to the main account under the initials D.C.M. I clicked. There wasn't much there, but enough to make the hair rise on my arms. 2 separate phone bills, confirmations for a storage unit in Pennsylvania, rental car receipts on dates Daniel said he had been driving out for work. A hotel loyalty account not under Daniel Mercer, but C. Hale. Who is C. Hale? Lily asked. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering too fast to breathe right. I didn't know. I could not remember hearing that name once. Not ever. That same night, I received the first email from an anonymous address. The subject line was only one sentence. You don't know who he really is. I opened it with hands shaking badly enough that I nearly clicked the wrong thing. It was only 3 lines. If you're looking for Daniel Mercer, stop using that name. It won't help you. I saw his engagement photos before they disappeared. I know that man. You need to be careful. No signature, no explanation. Nothing else. Lily read it over my shoulder and stood up so fast her chair scraped. What the hell? I sat still, feeling another stare disappear under my feet. My mind did not have enough strength left for shock, only a long spreading cold. I answered immediately, "Who are you?" "What do you know?" No reply. The next day, we drove down to Pennsylvania to the storage unit. More than 3 hours on the road. Gray sky, the radio playing sad country songs that made me want to smash it, and then leave it on because at least it filled the silence in the car. I watched the highway stretch on and thought about how many times Daniel had driven roads like this, while I had no idea where he was headed. The storage unit was under the name C. Hale, but Daniel had kept the backup email for it in his laptop. We had to wait for local police assistance to legally open it, because technically it was not my property. When the metal door rolled up, I expected old work boxes, maybe some tools, maybe some harmless mess. But the first thing I saw was a cardboard box sealed with silver tape, labeled in black marker, Photos/Chris. Not Daniel. Chris. I crouched down on the cold cement floor and opened the box with both hands shaking so badly, the strip of tape kept sticking back to my finger. Lily stood behind me, one hand on her hip, the other using her phone flashlight to shine into the box. Inside was not work paperwork or random junk like I had imagined. It was photographs, so many photographs, old-style printed pictures, the kind you pick up from CVS and keep in white envelopes. I lifted the first stack, and by the third picture, my knees truly gave way. Daniel, or the man I knew as Daniel, stood beside a dark-haired woman in an ivory wedding dress, his hand resting at the small of her back, smiling that familiar smile so precisely it made me think I was about to be sick. Not because the photograph looked like our engagement pictures, but because it looked like the way he had stood beside me dozens of times. The same slight tilt of his head to the left, the same way he pressed his mouth tight before smiling fully, the same hand holding the woman's elbow, as if he knew the exact point on a body that made someone feel protected. "Sarah," Lily whispered. I turned the photo over. Blue handwriting slightly smudged with time. Chris plus Lauren. Montauk, 2017. I do not know how long I sat there frozen. The name hit first. Chris, not Daniel. Then the year, 2017. I met him in late 2021, which meant that before me, there had been at least one other woman close enough, real enough, far enough along to reach bridal portraits and professional photos worthy of being boxed up like keepsakes. Lily crouched beside me. "Are you okay?" The question was so stupid it almost felt cruel, but I knew she had nothing else to offer. "No," I said honestly. "No, I'm not okay." My voice sounded like it was rising from the bottom of a well. There was more in the box than photographs, an expired driver's license with Daniel's face on it, but the name Christopher Daniel Hale, a photocopy of a social security card, a marriage certificate with the name Christopher D. Hale and a woman named Lauren Bishop, issued in Suffolk County, New York, a temporary separation filing, never fully completed, a stack of debt notices, 2 overdue credit card bills, an old business card from a construction company in Pennsylvania with the name Chris Hale, project coordinator. I held each thing in my hand and felt like I was peeling skin off a man I had once slept beside. "Jesus," Lily whispered. Then harder, "He didn't just leave the wedding. He's a whole other person." But the thing that froze me most was not the driver's license or the old marriage paper. It was the clear plastic bin in the back corner of the unit, labeled in black marker, "Personal keep separated." Lily dragged it out for me. Inside were 5 thin folders, each one with a woman's name written across the front in careful handwriting, almost too neat to look human. Melissa, Ava, Rachel, Sarah, and one last folder without a name yet, only a yellow sticky note crooked across the edge. Boston/Fall. I stared at the folder with my name on it and felt the skin on my arms rise. "Don't tell me." Lily started, then stopped. I opened the one labeled Sarah with both hands trembling. Inside were things no normal man should ever need to keep about the woman he planned to marry. A photocopy of my license, a scan of my passport from when I sent it to him for the honeymoon booking, a handwritten sheet with my mother's address, the name of the school where I worked, an estimated salary underlined in red, a note that read, "Mother emotionally attached/father deceased/sister protective." Another page listing my ring size, the wine I liked, the meal I usually ordered, the day I got paid, the date my old lease ended, the name of my family doc. I looked at those pages and felt, for a terrible second, that I was no longer a person at all, just a researched data set. Lily snatched the stack from my hand, read less than half a page, and swore out loud. "Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ." She flipped through the other folders. Melissa contained a lease for an apartment in New Jersey, a different engagement ring photo, credit card payment notes, and a wedding invitation proof that had never been sent. Ava had joint short-term loan paperwork for a couple in Connecticut, along with a few Polaroids of a blonde woman I did not know. Rachel's folder was thinner, just a few notes, house pictures, a ring receipt, and a scrap of paper that read, "Ended early." "Too suspicious." I heard those words and genuinely thought I might throw up. Lily dropped the flashlight onto the cement and grabbed my shoulders while I bent forward. The storage unit smelled like dust, old cardboard, and damp metal. But in that moment I could also smell Daniel's cologne from memory, that wood and soap scent that had once made me feel safe. And it was the overlap between present and memory that hurt so badly I could hardly breathe. "What the hell is he?" Lily asked, though not to me anymore. It was as if she were asking the empty air. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand, forced in a breath that hurt my lungs, and said, "Not who I thought." The sentence was too small for the size of the truth, but it was all I had then. "We photographed everything, every folder, every document, every picture." Lily called the local officer who had helped us get the unit opened and told him to come back immediately. When he arrived and looked over the folders and papers spread across the concrete, even he changed expression. Gone was the patient politeness of someone helping with a civil matter. This now looked like a pattern, a chain, a repeated act. On the drive back from Pennsylvania to Connecticut, I did not sleep a single minute even though it was fully dark by then. Lily drove, both hands clenched pale on the wheel, and I sat in the passenger seat holding a canvas bag full of evidence like it contained part of a body. Highway lights slid across the glass, flashing over my hands, over the folder with my name on it, over the old photo of Daniel or Chris, smiling beside Lauren. "What are you thinking?" Lily asked after almost an hour of silence. I watched the white lines moving backward outside the window. "I'm thinking maybe I was never loved. Just studied." Lily glanced at me fast, then back at the road. "Don't say that. But if everything he knew about me was written down like a client file, then what else do you call it?" She did not answer immediately. The tires hissed over the wet road. Finally, she said, "Maybe he acted. But what you felt was real. Don't let him steal the real part of you, too." The next day, I got a reply from the anonymous sender. Just one line. "I told you using Daniel Mercer wouldn't help. If you found the storage unit, then you're already deeper than I was. Meet me if you want the rest." Below it was the address of a cafe in New Haven and a time. 6:30 p.m. No name, no explanation. Lily insisted on coming with me. "I'm not letting you meet some anonymous person in this condition." I didn't argue. At that point, every decision felt like walking on thin ice. Having someone step with you does not make it less dangerous, but at least you can hear the cracking from more than one place. The woman sitting in the far corner of the cafe that evening looked close to 40, black hair cut to her shoulders. No lipstick, wearing a camel coat and a gray scarf. She stood when she saw me. And for one brief second, I thought the strangest thing in the world was how pain could make strangers recognize one another instantly. "Sarah," she asked. I nodded. "I'm Vanessa." Lily pulled a chair out and sat beside me, making no effort to hide how guarded she was. Vanessa looked at her and then back at me. "I'm not here to hurt you." I nearly laughed when she said that. At that point, the only hurt left was confirmation of things already terrible enough. Vanessa told her story in the flat voice of someone who had gone over it too many times in her own head to waste tears anymore. She met the man I knew as Daniel almost 3 years earlier, but under the name Evan Ross. They were living in Boston. He worked in logistics, or at least that was what she believed. The relationship lasted 10 months, long enough for him to move into her apartment, long enough to propose, long enough for them to put down a deposit on a small venue in Maine. Then 1 week before the wedding, he vanished. No note, no accident, no trace. He left behind a few cheap possessions, a wiped email account, and a joint credit card debt it took her nearly a year to untangle. "I thought I was the only story," Vanessa said, staring into her cold coffee. "Until a month ago, when a friend sent me the link to your wedding website. He'd used that same engagement photo style before everything got deleted, and I recognized his face instantly." "Why didn't you contact me sooner?" Lily asked before I could. Vanessa closed her eyes for a second. "I hesitated. I wasn't sure you'd believe me. And part of me, I didn't want to reopen that door." She looked up at me. "I'm sorry. If I'd moved faster, maybe." "No," I cut in. "Don't, because if that sentence finished, it would wound both of us." Vanessa gave me 2 important things. First, that his full real name was very likely Christopher Daniel Hale. Daniel was not completely false. Just one real fragment cut loose and used to build another identity. Second, that Lauren Bishop, the woman in the wedding photos from the storage unit, was not his only formal wife, but a relationship that had reached marriage paperwork and then collapsed midway, most likely after Lauren discovered financial lies. "I hired a private investigator for a while," Vanessa said. "I couldn't afford to follow it all the way through, but he found a few aliases. Chris Hale, Daniel Mercer, Evan Ross, probably more. He doesn't just romance women. He chooses women with stable lives. Enough independence, some savings, women who lean toward building home. He steps into their lives, learns everything about them, builds the image of a safe man, and then once things start requiring paperwork that gets too real, he disappears or takes what he needs before he goes." "Money?" Lily asked. Vanessa smiled without humor. "Sometimes money, sometimes loans, sometimes access, sometimes just a place to land until the next version of him is ready." I sat there listening and felt as if my skin were being peeled off layer by layer, not because the information was so different from what I already knew, but because it arranged everything I had once called love into a structure I hated having to accept. He was not simply a weak man afraid of marriage. He was a kind of soft predator, a kind who does not need to hit, shout, or control loudly. He only needs to learn you well enough to know when you will hand him the key through trust, before realizing that you've done it. The weeks after that became an investigation, lived side by side with mourning. During the day, I still had to go back to school, still sit in front of children with speech delays and tell them to slow down, breathe, try again, while I was also learning how to pronounce my own new life without shattering in the middle of it. At night, Lily and I sat on the living room floor amid piles of documents, laptops, receipts, printed photos, names, and addresses. We made timelines, alias lists, pinned things to foam board like low-budget detectives in a crime series. Except this criminal had slept in my bed, and known exactly how I took my tea when I couldn't sleep. I found money missing from the honeymoon account 3 days before the wedding. Not enough for the bank to automatically flag it, but enough to hurt. $8,200. Enough to understand that the day he disappeared from the wedding was not last-minute panic. It was a withdrawal planned in advance. Police began taking the case more seriously once Andrea, my lawyer, sent them everything from the storage unit along with Vanessa's statement. But what crushed me was not the slow legal process. It was that everyday life kept going. My mother still had to go to the grocery store. I still had to change the sheet. The electric bill still came. The lavender on the front porch still dried out if I forgot to water it. Nothing in the outside world stopped to pity your heart. And that, more than anything, is the humiliating part of adult pain. You still have to live while understanding that a huge piece of your life has just been proven false. About 2 months after the canceled wedding, I started getting these delayed bursts of anger. They arrived suddenly and dirtier than tears. One morning, I spotted his gray sweater at the back of my closet and threw it onto the kitchen floor like I was tossing a dead animal. Another afternoon, I opened the medicine cabinet and saw the Tylenol he used to keep stocked for me when I had headaches. And I had to sit down on the bathroom floor because that tiny kindness suddenly became a question. While he was learning how to care for me, how many other women was he learning too? One night Lily stayed over, and we sat on the back porch drinking wine when I said the ugliest thought I had yet. Maybe he picked me because I was lonely enough to believe in stability. Lily turned to face me fully. No, he picked you because you're good. Predators don't go looking for stupid women. They go looking for decent ones. I remember crying after she said that, not because it fixed anything right away, but because for the first time, someone had named the wounded part correctly. By early December, it looked as though the story was settling into paperwork, therapy, and long sleepless nights. Then I saw him. It was a cold, gray afternoon. I had driven down to Stamford to meet a former parent who wanted some extra advice for her son. The meeting ended early, so I stopped at an outdoor shopping center to buy a Christmas gift for Caleb. I remember the smell of roasted almonds and cinnamon from a kiosk near the square, the giant Christmas tree in the center draped in silver ornaments, the outdoor speakers playing Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, which I had started to hate with a real bitterness after the wedding because it was far too gentle a song for people who were falling apart. I was holding a Lego box in my hand when I heard a man's voice behind me. Low and so familiar that every muscle in my back went rigid before I even turned around. I turned, and there he was. Daniel, no Chris, no whatever name he was wearing then. Same build, same short dark hair, same slight tilt of the head when he listened to someone speak. But he was not alone. A woman stood beside him. A few years younger than me, dark blonde hair, camel coat, latte in her hand. She was smiling at him in that way women smile before they know the worst thing about the man in front of them. And her other hand rested on a stroller. Inside was a boy maybe 2 years old, a pacifier in his mouth. Not Daniel's child. I didn't know. Maybe hers, maybe someone else's. But what made my heart fall straight into my stomach was not the child. It was the way he bent down, adjusted the blanket over him, then straightened and said something that made the woman laugh and touch his sleeve. That gesture, that softness, the thing I used to think belonged only to me. I stood frozen in the middle of the walkway, the Lego box in my hand, my ears ringing. For one very short second, I thought I could turn around, walk away, call the police, let someone else handle it. Then he looked up and saw me. Every trace of color disappeared from his face, exactly the way I had imagined it might at some future Father's Day confrontation in my head. Except now there was no backyard, no 2 families, no witnesses, just a giant fake Christmas tree, holiday music, and about 10 steps of open space between us. The woman beside him followed his line of sight. Ben, she asked. Ben, a new name, of course. He stepped toward me before I could do anything. Sarah, he said, voice low and rough. I took half a step back. I don't know whether I meant don't come closer or don't say my name. Probably both. The woman looked between us, confusion rising visibly in her face. Do you know her? She asked. Daniel, Ben, Chris. Whatever he was in that moment turned to her, and the speed with which a man who lives inside multiple roles can rearrange his face showed itself in one horrifying instant. An old friend, he said. Then he turned back to me, and the first thing he truly said to me after the wedding day was, "You weren't supposed to find me." If anyone had recorded that moment, I think they would have seen how unlike movie confrontations real life is. I did not scream. I did not slap him. I did not hurl the Lego box at his head. I just stood there, cold all the way into my bones, and asked, "So you knew you were hiding?" His mouth tight. The woman took a step closer, suspicion sharpening in her eyes. Ben, what's going on? He did not answer her. He only looked at me with those gray eyes that once made me think I could trust where they led, and said softly, "Not here." I laughed then. A laugh so thin it startled even me. "That's your favorite line, isn't it? Not here, not now, just enough to buy yourself one more hallway to run down." The woman's whole face changed. "Ben," she repeated, and this time there was no softness left in it. I turned to her. I did not want to blow up some stranger's life in the middle of a shopping center before Christmas. But I also could not watch another woman take one more step into what I had stepped into without warning. "His name may not be Ben," I said. "It may not be Daniel either. I knew him as Daniel Mercer. Before that, someone else knew him as Evan Ross. His real name may be Christopher Hale." The woman looked at me as if I had started speaking another language. Then she looked at him, then at the child. "Tell me she's lying." Daniel said nothing, and it was his silence more than anything else that changed her face. Some truths don't need more evidence. They only need the liar to run out of speed. He pulled me a few steps away, toward the corner of the tree where fewer people would hear. "Sarah, listen to me." I looked at the hand that had just touched my sleeve and jerked away like it had burned me. "No, you listen to me." My voice was low enough to be frightening. "You didn't just leave. You erased me. You left me standing in a wedding dress in front of everyone I love, and turned me into a woman who had been abandoned without giving me a single answer. How many times have you done this?" His jaw locked. "It's not as simple as you think," I laughed. "Of course. It never is with men like you." He looked away for a second. "I didn't plan to hurt you." "Then what exactly was the plan?" I asked. "To marry me under a fake name. To vanish after taking the honeymoon money. To keep me just long enough until the next woman was ready." He did not deny it. "And that was when the whole air between us shifted. I don't know what would have happened if the woman hadn't stepped over right then." She stood about 2 feet from us, the child now lifted into her arms, her face gone white, but still holding on to that brittle public composure people wear when they haven't decided whether to collapse yet. "Who is she?" she asked again. "No pet names now, just the precise coldness of someone beginning to fit the pieces of her own life together." Daniel looked from her to me, and for the first time in all of this, he no longer looked like a man controlling the rhythm of a story. Just a man stripped out of each mask one by one. He began, then stopped. I looked directly at the woman and said it for him. "I was supposed to marry him 3 months ago." The silence after that felt so thick that the Christmas music over the speakers turned insulting. She looked at him, then at me, then down at the child in her arms as if trying to verify that the ground beneath her was still real. "No," she said. The sound of her voice told me some part of her had already believed me. He dragged a hand through his hair. The exact gesture I used to think was one of the rare signs of genuine panic in him. "I can explain." I looked at him and felt absolute exhaustion settle over whatever was still burning inside me. "Kong," I said in Vietnamese by reflex, then repeated in English, "No, you can't, because explanation belongs to reality, and everything about you was built to avoid it." She took one step backward. "Tell me your real name," she said to him, slowly, word by word, and for the first time, I saw something close to real shame flicker across his face. "Christopher," he said, so softly it almost disappeared. "Christopher Hale." The woman closed her eyes for 1 second, as if someone had slapped her in the middle of a crowded square. I didn't stay to watch the next part of their lives. I did not need one more public confession to heal me. I had enough truth already, enough to kill what little illusion remained. Before I left, I only said one thing. A sentence Lily later told my mother, because for some reason it stayed with her. "The man I loved never existed." Then I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I did not wait for an apology. I did not wait for an explanation. Some confrontations do not end with victory. They only end when you finally stop waiting for a corpse to come back to life. After that, I handed everything over to the police and to my lawyer. One more witness, one more name, one more half-started deception attached to him. Some small part of me once wanted to see him arrested right away, handcuffed, dragged into the light like a scene from television, as if public exposure could balance what he had taken. But real life does not run on symbolic justice. It runs on paperwork, files, testimony, waiting, sleepless nights, emails with investigators, photocopies, and the same questions asked again and again. I cooperated as much as I could. Vanessa did too. After a few weeks, Lauren agreed to speak through her attorney. We did not become some sisterhood of revenge. None of us had the strength left for something that neat. We were just separate women speaking into the same microphone, saying that this one man had existed in each of our lives in the same pattern, and that the truth of him matched none of the names he had used. And strangely enough, the worst pain was not when I saw him with another woman. It was not even when I opened the folder with my name on it. It was the ordinary mornings afterward, the mornings when I woke up and for a few seconds forgot, And then everything came rushing back over me like ice water. I was no longer just a bride who had been left at the altar. I was a survivor of an illusion, and that required learning again, 1 inch at a time. I started therapy every Wednesday. Dana, my therapist, was a woman in her 50s with a soft voice that never drifted into vagueness. In our third session, she asked, "What destroyed you most?" I thought I would say the humiliation, or the money, or the fact that my whole world had been proven false. But what I said instead was that I don't trust my own memories anymore. Dana nodded. Because he didn't just lie to you, he colonized your memory. I sat in my car and cried for almost 20 minutes after that session, because at last someone had named the wound exactly. He had not only left me, he had taken up residence inside my memories under a false identity. And now every beautiful moment had to pass through a kind of new internal customs check to see whether it was still allowed to exist. There were days when some tiny thing would make me cry. A man adjusting his wife's scarf in the grocery store, Christmas tree in the corner of a restaurant, a gray sweater, a line from First Day of My Life, the song we once played driving to Cape Cod. There were days I was so angry I thought if I ever saw him again, I would destroy everything around. There were also days, strange days, when I just felt sorrow for the version of me who had believed. Not because she was stupid, because she was good. And that, as Lily said, is exactly what men like him choose first. Good people believe their decency will be seen and returned with decency. They are not trained to smell predation in gentle gestures. I sold the wedding dress after almost a year, not to get money back, but so it would not die with my story. I sent it to an organization that repairs and donates gowns to women who want a small wedding or a bridal portrait, but do not have the means for one. When I packed it up, I touched the lace and remembered standing in the bridal suite, remembered the peonies, remembered Uncle David in the doorway, remembered the moment when I still thought Daniel was simply scared and not gone from my life forever. I cried while boxing it, but the crying that day was not dirty the way it used to be. It felt more like saying goodbye properly to an old version of myself. My mother once asked a question I think a lot of people around me wanted to ask too. If you could go back, would you choose never to have met him, or would you still meet him and just know sooner? It took me nearly a full minute to answer. Finally, I said, I'd want to know sooner, because the beautiful part I had wasn't completely meaningless. It was just built on someone who wasn't real. My mother sat with that for a while, then said, then what you lost wasn't him. It was the illusion of him. I think that was the truest thing anyone said to me through this whole story. Now, if someone asks me what hurt most, I won't say the abandoned wedding day, even though that image can still make it hard to breathe years later. I won't even say seeing him with another woman beneath a Christmas tree, though that moment nailed everything shut forever. The worst part was realizing that I had allowed a person who did not exist to live in the holiest rooms of my life. My kitchen, my bed, the hospital, family dinners, my mother's voice, the arms around me when my father died, the proposal on the beach. He did not just step into my life. I invited him all the way into the deepest place where I keep trust. And it turned out the thing living there all that time was only a well-rehearsed performance. But if you ask me what the strongest thing left behind is, I will say this: the truth. The truth did not give me back the wedding deposit. It did not fix the family photographs. It cannot answer all the questions that the Sophie and Caleb of some other life might have asked if I had children with him. It did not clean the old memories right away, but it saved me from dying slowly inside a false story. It pulled me out of a paper house before I called it home for real. And sometimes saving yourself doesn't look like victory. It looks like surviving one more morning, then another, then enough mornings that one day, when you drive past the place where you once collapsed, your chest no longer tightens the way it used to. My name is Sarah. I once stood in a wedding dress, surrounded by the smell of white flowers and the sound of string music, waiting for the man I loved to step forward and choose me. He never came, and later I understood that was not the moment I lost him, because the man I loved had never truly existed in the first place. What I lost was the illusion of him, and what I kept after all the humiliation, the pain, the anger, and the ashes was myself. And looking back now, that is the ending of the story I want to keep.